My cheek burned with the raw, stinging force of the slap. The sharp, cracking sound echoed through the hushed, velvet-lined elegance of the high-end jewelry boutique, instantly silencing the gentle classical music playing from the hidden ceiling speakers. Everyone in the room stopped dead in their tracks. My own sister, her face twisted into an ugly mask of bitter jealousy, had just shoved me hard against the thick glass of the display case and struck me across the face, calling me a pathetic shadow. Why? Because for the very first time in my entire existence, I was being treated like a VIP while purchasing a pair of diamond earrings with my own hard-earned money. But before she could even think about raising her manicured hand to strike me a second time, a deep, commanding voice shattered the tense silence of the room. Hurt my wife again and see what happens. It was a billionaire tech mogul. My sister froze, the color draining from her face, and then she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Let me tell you exactly how my entire toxic family dynamic exploded into the ultimate, most satisfying revenge I could have ever imagined. My name is Sutton. I am 27 years old, and up until that precise, earth-shattering moment in the jewelry store, I had lived my life as a ghost in my own family's home. I work as the supply chain director for Apex Logistics, one of the largest maritime shipping corporations on the eastern seaboard. It is a grueling, unforgiving, and incredibly high-pressure profession. I spend my days, and often my nights, staring at endless spreadsheets, optimizing international freight routes, and negotiating shipping contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. My job requires ice-cold logic, rapid calculation, and an unwavering ability to detach from personal emotions. When a cargo ship gets stuck in a port halfway across the world at 3 in the morning, I am the one who gets the phone call. I am the one who has to fix it. I am exceptionally good at what I do. I built my career from nothing, scraping by on cheap instant noodles and 4 hours of sleep a night during my college years, while desperately holding down 2 minimum wage jobs just to pay for my textbooks. I never asked my parents for a single dime, and frankly, nobody in my family ever offered to help me anyway. To fully understand how a simple, quiet purchase of jewelry escalated into public violence, you have to understand my older sister, Fallon. Fallon is 29 years old, stunningly beautiful in that effortless, heavily curated, social media perfect way, and she refers to herself as a freelance event planner. I use the word freelance very loosely because she has never actually planned a single event that any real client has ever paid her for. She lives in a luxury, sun-drenched downtown apartment, which is funded entirely by our parents, Evander and Delphine. Fallon is the undisputed golden child of our family. The sun, the moon, and the stars all revolve around her fluctuating moods, her endless wants, and her exhausting, daily dramas. If Fallon is happy, the house is at peace. If Fallon is mildly inconvenienced, the entire family must drop everything to rush to her aid and soothe her bruised ego. Growing up in our suburban household meant learning a very harsh lesson early on. Love was entirely conditional, and I simply did not meet the required conditions. I was the invisible blade they used to continuously sharpen Fallon's fragile ego. If Fallon managed to get a B on a college midterm after 3 attempts, it was a massive cause for a celebratory steak dinner. If I brought home a straight A report card, my mother would barely glance at it, casually reminding me that grades are not everything and pointing out that Fallon had such a vibrant, magnetic social life, unlike me, who spent too much time reading. I was the designated scapegoat. I was the quiet girl in the corner of the room, constantly swallowing my feelings, silencing my own needs, and making myself as small as possible so I would not disrupt the delicate, toxic ecosystem of my family's relentless obsession with my older sister. I will never, ever forget the day my college acceptance letter arrived in the mail. I was 18, and I had spent months agonizing over my applications. I had applied for a full academic scholarship to a top-tier state university, knowing deep down that it was my one and only ticket out of that suffocating house. The heavy, cream-colored envelope came in the afternoon mail, thick and full of promise. I left it carefully on the kitchen island counter while I ran upstairs to wash my hands, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs with anticipation. I was so excited I could barely breathe. When I came back downstairs less than 2 minutes later, the envelope was gone. The counter was totally bare. Panic set in. I frantically searched the kitchen, eventually finding my mother, Delphine, in the adjacent laundry room. She was standing at the ironing board, meticulously steaming and pressing every single delicate fold of a pink silk dress that Fallon was planning to wear to a fraternity party that weekend. I asked her, my voice trembling, where my university letter went. Without even bothering to take her eyes off the steaming iron, she gestured vaguely toward the overflowing kitchen trash can. She thought it was just junk mail, she said casually, waving a hand in the air. Just some random promotional flyer. She didn't offer a single word of apology. She didn't even look at my face to see the devastation in my eyes. She simply kept ironing Fallon's party dress, carefully smoothing out the tiny wrinkles of my sister's perfectly funded life, while literally discarding my entire future into the garbage. I had to dig through coffee grounds and eggshells just to retrieve the letter that said I was getting a full ride to college. That was the established dynamic. Evander and Delphine were the ultimate enablers. They didn't actively sit in a dark room plotting my demise. They were just profoundly indifferent to my existence, unless they needed someone to blame for something going wrong. They desperately needed Fallon to remain dependent on them because it made them feel important, wealthy, and necessary. My quiet independence was a direct threat to their parenting narrative. My ability to pay my own rent, buy my own practical clothes, and solve my own complex problems made them feel redundant. Because they couldn't control me with money, they punished me with silence and emotional coldness. They acted like my hard-won success was a deliberate, spiteful insult to Fallon's ongoing struggles to find herself. And Fallon? Fallon knew, deep down in the dark corners of her mind, that without our parents' bank accounts, she was nothing but a pretty face with zero work ethic. That deep-seated insecurity bred a vicious, toxic need to constantly step on my neck just so she could feel a few inches taller. She needed me to be the failure so she could remain the princess. For years, I played my assigned part to perfection. I kept my head down, poured every ounce of my energy into building my corporate career, and let them live in their comfortable, shared delusion. I honestly thought that if I just worked hard enough, if I reached a level of undeniable, objective success, they would finally have no choice but to look at me and see my worth. I thought that buying myself a pair of diamond earrings that cost half a year's rent would be a tangible symbol of my arrival, a quiet but firm declaration that I had finally made it to the top. But I had no idea that those beautiful, sparkling diamonds would be the very spark that burned this entire family facade straight to the ground. The Sunday evening right before the chaotic jewelry store incident, I drove across town to my parents' house for our mandatory, often excruciating, monthly family dinner. For once in my life, I was actually buzzing with genuine, uncontainable excitement. I had just been officially promoted to supply chain director at Apex Logistics. It was a monumental achievement for someone my age. The promotion came with a massive salary increase, top-tier executive benefits, and a corner office with a view of the harbor. For the first time since I moved out at 18, I felt like I had real, substantial breathing room in my budget. I walked up the driveway, clutching a bottle of expensive red wine, fully ready to share the incredible news with the people who were supposed to love me. Walking through the front door of that suburban house always felt exactly like stepping into a curated museum dedicated solely to my own childhood pain. Everywhere I looked, in every single room, there were glaring physical reminders of my second-class citizenship within the family. In the living room, resting under a sweating, condensation-covered glass of iced tea, was my National Mathematics Award plaque. It was a heavy, engraved piece of walnut wood that I had won in high school. My mother had repurposed it as a beverage coaster because she claimed the dark would match the aesthetic of her vintage coffee table. Walking past the hallway closet, I remembered the agonizing summer I turned 19. I had worked myself to the bone, saving $5,000 in cash by working grueling double shifts at a greasy local diner. I desperately needed that money to buy a reliable used car so I could commute to my unpaid logistics internship across the city. I kept the stack of bills hidden inside a metal tin box on the top shelf of my childhood closet. One afternoon, I came home exhausted, smelling of fryer grease, and found the tin box wide open and entirely empty. When I confronted my parents in a state of sheer panic, my mother calmly sipped her coffee and explained that Fallon was going through a very tough, emotionally draining breakup with her college boyfriend and desperately needed a mental reset. They had taken my hard-earned savings to fund Fallon's spontaneous, all-inclusive trip to a resort in Cancun. They casually promised to pay me back when things settled down. They never paid back a single cent. Then there was the dining room, where I had to sit during the time I suffered a ruptured appendix at 21. I had woken up in a sterile hospital recovery room, shivering violently from the anesthesia and in blinding pain, surrounded by sympathetic nurses, but entirely alone. I had called my parents from the hospital's landline phone, praying they would rush over. My father answered the phone, sounding incredibly annoyed, shouting over the heavy, thumping bass music in the background. They were attending a 3-day outdoor indie music festival because Fallon had really wanted to see her favorite band and threw a fit about not wanting to go alone. My father sighed into the receiver, told me to just ask the nurses to call me a cab, and advised me to get some rest at home. He hung up before I could even tell him how many stitches I had. I forcefully shook off the heavy weight of those memories, plastering a polite smile on my face as I walked into the dining room. The large oak table was already set with the good china and the expensive crystal glasses. Fallon was sitting at the head of the table, holding court as usual, her blonde hair perfectly blown out and cascading over her shoulders. Beside her sat Hayes. Hayes was a commercial freight broker, a guy with a slick, practiced smile, incredibly expensive Italian leather shoes, and a boutique brokerage company that always seemed to be chasing the next massive, life-changing deal. He had been dating Fallon for exactly 6 months. I quietly took my designated seat near the kitchen door, patiently waiting for a lull in their animated conversation so I could speak. After the salads were cleared, I finally cleared my throat, sitting up straight. Mom, Dad, I have some really great news about work. I just got promoted to the position of. Before the word director could even leave my lips, Fallon stood up so incredibly fast that her heavy wooden chair screeched loudly against the hardwood floor. She slammed her hand flat down on the table, rattling the silverware. "Everyone!" she shouted, her blue eyes gleaming with a frantic, triumphant, almost manic light. "Hayes and I have a massive announcement." She thrust her left hand forward, shoving it right into our parents' line of sight. A massive, slightly gaudy, halo-cut diamond ring glittered blindingly on her ring finger. "We are getting married next spring." The dining room instantly erupted into pure chaos. My mother gasped loudly, knocking over her cloth napkin as she rushed around the table, tears of joy streaming rapidly down her face to pull Fallon into a tight embrace. My father jumped up, laughing heartily, and clapped Hayes firmly on the shoulder, enthusiastically welcoming him to the family and calling him son. The noise, the celebration, the overwhelming validation in the room was deafening. I sat there, frozen in my chair, the words of my hard-won promotion dying a quiet, pathetic death in my throat. Once again, without even trying, I was entirely erased from the narrative. I swallowed the heavy lump of disappointment in my throat and genuinely tried to be happy for her. I really did try. I poured myself a tall glass of ice water, noticing that my hand was shaking very slightly. "Congratulations, Fallon," I said quietly, my voice barely cutting through the loud celebration. "That is really wonderful news." She paused her hugging, turning her head to look down at me. Her eyes narrowed into dangerous little slits. She had noticed my brief silence during the initial uproar. She noticed that I was not weeping with uncontrollable joy like our mother. "What is wrong, Sutton?" she asked, her voice suddenly dropping its joyful tone, dripping with a thick, fake concern that was meant to humiliate me. "Are you feeling jealous?" "It is okay if you are." "I am not jealous, Fallon. I just had some news too, but it really can wait." "Let's celebrate you tonight," I said, reaching out to take a sip of my ice water, wanting nothing more than to defuse the escalating tension. She didn't let it go. She stepped much closer to me, her aura radiating a sudden, intense hostility. "You always do this," she hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. "You always try to ruin my special moments. You just cannot stand the fact that someone actually loves me enough to want to marry me, while you sit entirely alone in your cold, empty little apartment with your boring spreadsheets and your sad little life." As she leaned in to deliver the final insult, her hip bumped the edge of the table hard. The vibration caused my tall water glass to tip over, spilling a very small, harmless puddle of water onto the placemat toward her. It was a total accident, a minor, clumsy moment caused entirely by her own aggressive movement. But Fallon shrieked at the top of her lungs, leaping back as if I had just thrown a vat of boiling acid directly onto her designer dress. Before anyone could even blink, Fallon grabbed her own full, heavy crystal glass of ice water and, with a vicious, deliberate flick of her wrist, tossed the entire freezing contents directly onto my chest. The freezing water soaked instantly through my only good, tailored work blazer, the exact blazer I had worn specifically because I wanted to look sharp and professional when I announced my executive promotion. I gasped loudly, the icy shock hitting my system, freezing me in place as the water dripped down my white silk blouse. "Fallon!" I yelled, jumping up from my chair, water dripping from my hem onto the floor. "What is wrong with you?" My mother rushed forward immediately. But she did not come with a towel for me. Instead, she grabbed Fallon's arm and pulled her back protectively, glaring at me. "Sutton Marie," my mother scolded, her voice shrill and full of furious disappointment. "Look at what you just did. You provoked her on purpose. You could not just let her have this one single night of happiness, could you? You are so incredibly bitter and spiteful." I stood there, dripping wet, shivering slightly from the cold water, looking at the three of them forming a united wall against me. My father didn't even look at me. He just pointed a stiff finger toward the front door. "Just go home, Sutton. You have upset your sister enough for one evening. We do not want your toxic negativity ruining this beautiful celebration." I didn't argue with them. I didn't shed a single tear. 5 years of intense therapy had taught me a vital survival rule: you do not bleed in front of sharks. I turned around in total silence, grabbed my purse from the entryway table, and walked out the front door, the wet, heavy fabric of my blazer clinging uncomfortably to my skin in the cool night air. I drove the entire way back to my apartment in utter, profound silence. When I finally unlocked my front door, I peeled off the ruined, water-stained jacket and threw it directly into the kitchen trash can. I walked into my bedroom, sat on the edge of my mattress, opened my leather wallet, and slowly pulled out my heavy, solid metal black credit card. The card that had my brand new, hard-earned executive title securely attached to the checking account. Tomorrow was Monday, the start of the corporate work week. But tomorrow morning, I was going to email my team and take a half-day off. I was going to do something that the old, terrified version of Sutton would never dare to do. I was going to go out and buy myself a tangible, undeniable physical reminder that I mattered, that I was successful, even if my own blood relatives refused to ever see it. The very next morning, the sun rose bright and sharp over the city. I sat at my home office desk, sipping a strong cup of black coffee, and typed out a brief email to my logistics management team, informing them that I would be entirely offline and unreachable until noon. Once the email was sent, I walked into my bedroom and prepared myself with meticulous care. I dressed in a beautifully tailored, dark navy blue sheath dress that hugged my frame perfectly. I put on a pair of sleek, professional heels, styled my hair into a neat blowout, and applied my makeup with careful, deliberate precision. Today, I was not Sutton the invisible daughter. I was Sutton, the supply chain director. I drove my car across town to the famously wealthy, upscale commercial district, eventually parking along a pristine, tree-lined street right in front of Callaway's fine jewelry. It was exactly the kind of intimidating establishment that did not bother putting price tags in their window displays. It was the kind of place equipped with a heavily armed, imposing security guard standing quietly by the thick, reinforced glass door, ensuring that the chaotic noise and grime of the city remained firmly outside. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I pushed the heavy brass handle and opened the door. I was immediately greeted by a rush of cool, air-conditioned air, the subtle, luxurious scent of expensive white lilies, and the soft, soothing hum of a cello playing through a high-end sound system. A woman dressed in a remarkably sharp, immaculate black suit approached me within seconds. Her keen eyes quickly but politely scanned my demeanor, my posture, and my clothing, instantly categorizing me as a serious, wealthy buyer rather than a casual window shopper. "Good morning, madam. I am Tara," she said, offering a warm, highly trained, professional smile. "Welcome to Callaway's. How may I assist you on this lovely morning?" "I want to look at your collection of diamond stud earrings," I told her, making sure my voice was steady and projected confidence. "I am looking for a princess cut. High clarity, excellent color. I am celebrating a very major career milestone today, and I want something truly special." Tara's eyes lit up with genuine appreciation. She gently led me past the main floor counters to a private, velvet-lined viewing room in the back, offering me sparkling water before bringing out several heavy, black velvet trays. For the next hour, I sat in quiet luxury as I learned about precise diamond cuts, light refraction, clarity scales, and platinum settings. Finally, after inspecting dozens of pairs under a specialized magnifying loupe, I found them. They were absolutely breathtaking. They were brilliant, sharp, unclouded, and perfect in every conceivable way. "These are the ones," I said, looking up at Tara, feeling a surge of genuine joy in my chest. Tara nodded approvingly, recognizing my decisive nature. "An excellent, exquisite choice, madam. These particular stones have a flawless rating. They are priced at $18,500. I didn't even blink. My pulse remained entirely steady. "I will take them," I said, reaching into my designer purse and pulling out my heavy, metal black credit card, placing it gently onto the velvet mat. Just as Tara reached out to take the card to begin processing the transaction, the delicate silver chime of the boutique's front door rang out sharply. A second later, a loud, incredibly shrill, obnoxious laugh shattered the refined, peaceful quiet of the store. I stiffened instantly. Every muscle in my back went rigid. I knew that specific, mocking laugh anywhere in the world. "Oh my God, wait, is that Sutton?" I slowly turned around. Standing right there in the grand entrance of the boutique, flanked on either side by her two perpetually sycophantic best friends, Romy and Jovi, was my sister, Fallon. Fallon was dressed in a skin-tight, brightly colored pink designer dress, holding an oversized, overpriced iced latte, looking around the sophisticated store with an air of unearned arrogance, as if she owned the entire building. She spotted me sitting in the private viewing area, and her initial confusion morphed rapidly into a cruel, predatory smirk. She marched straight over to my section, the sharp heels of her shoes clicking aggressively and loudly against the polished marble floor. "What in the world are you doing in a place like this?" Fallon asked loudly, looking me up and down with exaggerated disgust. "Are you totally lost? The discount clearance rack at the outlet mall is a few miles down the road, sweetie. You must have taken a wrong turn." Romy and Jovi snickered loudly behind her, covering their mouths like mean-spirited high schoolers. "I am shopping, Fallon," I said, keeping my voice incredibly even, refusing to let her see the spike of adrenaline hitting my bloodstream. I turned my attention back to the saleswoman. "Tara, please go ahead and process the transaction." Fallon forcefully pushed her way right up to the glass counter, leaning over and peering into the velvet tray at the stunning diamond earrings I had just selected. She let out a loud, theatrical, mocking scoff that echoed through the room. "Shopping?" she repeated, her tone dripping with venomous sarcasm. "For what? Are you buying an empty little cardboard box?" She turned her gaze to Tara, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Don't even bother running that piece of plastic, honey. She is a glorified warehouse worker who counts boxes for a living. Her sad little waitress salary from 10 years ago isn't going to cover the basic sales tax on anything in this place." Tara's practiced, professional smile slipped very slightly, but she maintained her excellent composure, straightening her posture. "Ma'am," she said in a firm, polite tone, your sister is in the middle of finalizing a very significant purchase. I must ask that you please keep your voice down to respect the privacy and comfort of our other clients in the boutique." "Sister?" Fallon sneered, practically spitting the word out. "Unfortunately, yes, we share the same DNA, though you would never guess it by looking at us." She turned her venom right back to me, crossing her arms. "Seriously, Sutton. This is beyond embarrassing. Are you trying to pretend you have money just because I got engaged to a successful man last night? Are you really that deeply pathetic and desperate to compete with my happiness?" "I am not competing with you, Fallon," I replied calmly. "I got a major promotion at work. I am buying these diamonds for myself to celebrate my own success." "A promotion? What, did they finally make you the head forklift driver at the docks?" Jovi chimed in from the back, earning a loud, obnoxious high-five from Romy. I felt the familiar, burning heat of humiliation creeping up the back of my neck, but I refused to break eye contact. I refused to let them see me sweat. I looked Fallon dead in the eye, my voice turning to ice. "Actually, I am the new supply chain director for the entire corporation. And I can easily afford these." Fallon's face twisted into an ugly grimace. The very idea that I was successful, truly and financially successful on a massive scale, was a reality her fragile ego simply could not compute. It directly threatened her entire worldview and her established superiority. Out of sheer spite, she reached out and aggressively grabbed the velvet box containing the earrings. "Let me see these fake little pieces of cheap glass," she demanded loudly. "Please do not touch that," I said firmly, reaching out to take the box back from her grasp. As I pulled the box toward me, Fallon maliciously yanked her arm away with a violent jerk. As she did, the heavy, solid metal hardware corner of her oversized designer handbag swung wildly through the air and slammed with brutal force into the edge of the pristine glass display case behind us. A loud, sickening, scratching crack echoed through the room. A deep, highly visible groove now permanently marred the expensive glass surface. The heavy-set security guard standing near the front door immediately stepped forward, his hand resting near his radio, his eyes locked on our altercation. "Look what you just did!" Fallon shrieked at the top of her lungs, pointing a trembling finger right directly at my face. "You are so clumsy and stupid." She quickly turned to the approaching security guard, her eyes wide with fake, exaggerated panic. She just went totally crazy and violently shoved my bag into the glass. "She is completely unhinged. You need to remove her." I stared at her, utterly appalled by the sheer, shameless audacity of the lie. She was trying to frame me for property damage in front of witnesses. "You did that, Fallon," I said, my voice rising just a fraction to assert the truth. "The cameras in this room caught everything." She stepped right into my personal space, her heavy, sweet perfume suffocating the air between us. Her eyes were dark, swirling with a kind of chaotic rage I had never seen from her before. The realization that I was calmly purchasing $18,000 earrings while she was still living on our daddy's monthly allowance was literally breaking her brain. "You think you are so much better than me, don't you?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with pure malice, saliva practically flying from her lips. "You are nothing, Sutton. You will always be the ugly, boring, pathetic, unwanted shadow of this family." I stood my ground. I did not step back. The old, terrified version of Sutton would have stared at the floor. The old Sutton would have apologized profusely just to end the embarrassing public scene. I didn't. I looked her up and down with cold, devastating pity. "I am not a shadow, Fallon. I am the only adult in our entire family who actually works for a living. You are a 29-year-old child playing dress-up with our parents' money." Her face contorted in sheer, unadulterated fury. The ugly, undeniable truth hit her like a physical, heavy blow to the stomach. And before I could even process the sudden shift in her posture, her hand flew through the air. Smack. The slap was incredibly forceful, carrying the full weight of her furious, unchecked rage. Her open palm connected squarely with my left cheek, the brutal impact snapping my head violently to the side. The stinging sensation was immediate and overwhelming, radiating a fierce heat across my skin, rapidly followed by the sharp, metallic taste of blood pooling in my mouth where my teeth had forcefully caught the inside of my lower lip. The luxurious boutique fell dead, terrifyingly silent. The classical cello music seemed to stop entirely, as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Romy and Jovi froze like statues, their mocking, cruel smiles vanishing in an instant, replaced by expressions of genuine, wide-eyed shock. Tara, the composed saleswoman, gasped loudly, raising both hands to cover her mouth in sheer horror at what she had just witnessed. I slowly, very deliberately, turned my head back to look directly at Fallon. My cheek throbbed with a dull, heavy, rhythmic pulse of pain. Fallon stood there, breathing heavily, her chest heaving, her hand still raised slightly in the air. Her eyes started wildly, reflecting a chaotic mixture of initial triumph and sudden, dawning panic. She had crossed a massive, irreversible line. We had fought with vicious words our entire lives, we had screamed and cried, but she had never, ever physically struck me. She opened her mouth, her jaw working, perhaps to justify the violence, perhaps to loudly tell the room that I had somehow deserved it. Hurt my wife again and see what happens. The voice did not come from the approaching security guard. It came from directly behind me. It was a deep, incredibly resonant baritone voice that carried an unmistakable, heavy weight of absolute authority. It was the kind of voice that demanded immediate compliance. I turned around, my hand instinctively coming up to cut my burning cheek. Standing just a few feet away, having silently emerged from another viewing room, was a man in his late 30s. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad, commanding shoulders that perfectly filled out a stunning, custom-tailored charcoal gray suit. His jawline was sharp and rigid, his dark hair impeccably styled, but it was his eyes that truly commanded the entire room. They were a piercing, stormy, intelligent gray, and they were locked onto Fallon with the kind of cold, intense, terrifying fury that makes people instinctively stop breathing. "Excuse me?" Fallon stammered, her entire posture shrinking, her loud bravado shattering instantly into a million pieces under the weight of his glare. The man took 2 slow, highly deliberate steps forward, smoothly placing his tall frame slightly between me and my sister, forming a physical barrier. "You heard exactly what I said," he stated, his voice dropping an octave, sounding as cold and hard as solid ice. "If you ever dare to raise a hand to my wife again, I promise you will deeply and permanently regret it." "Wife?" Fallon looked at me in utter bewilderment, then frantically back at the imposing man, her shallow brain scrambling desperately to make sense of the bizarre situation. "Who the hell are you?" "She is not your wife. I am her sister." The man did not flinch, nor did he break his intense eye contact with her. "I do not care who you think you are, or what twisted relation you claim to have to her," he said, his gaze pinning Fallon to the marble floor like a specimen under glass. "But I just stood here and witnessed you physically assault a woman in a public space. Your behavior is repulsive, pathetic, and entirely unacceptable." I stood there, completely stunned, my mind racing 100 miles an hour. I kept my hand pressed to my throbbing face. I had never seen this handsome, intimidating man before in my entire life. Why on earth was he calling me his wife? Why was he defending me with such fierce conviction? The loud commotion had finally drawn the attention of the store owner, an older, highly distinguished gentleman with silver hair who quickly emerged from a private back office. He hurried over to our section, his face pale with concern, but his eyes widened in instant recognition as he saw the man in the charcoal suit. "Mr. Walsh," the owner said, his tone instantly shifting into a state of deep, respectful deference. "Is there a problem here? Are you all right, sir?" Mr. Walsh did not look away from Fallon. "Mr. Calloway," he addressed the owner without turning his head. "This unhinged woman just physically assaulted another customer right in front of my eyes, and she deliberately damaged your expensive glass display case in the process. I strongly suggest you handle this situation immediately, before I decide to call my personal security detail or the police to handle it for you." Calloway turned his attention to Fallon, his polite, accommodating expression instantly hardening into unforgiving stone. "We have a strict, Zero tolerance policy for any kind of violence in this establishment, madam, he said sternly, his voice echoing in the quiet store. And I clearly see the severe damage you just caused to our property. Frank, he signaled sharply to the heavy-set security guard who was already moving in, escort these women out of my store immediately. You cannot do this to me. Fallon shrieked, her face turning an incredibly ugly, mottled shade of red as panic set in. Do you have any idea who my father is? He is Evander. I do not care if your father is the mayor of this city or the president himself, Mr. Calloway snapped cuttingly, pointing a rigid finger straight toward the heavy glass exit doors. Get out of my store right now before I press criminal charges for the damages. Frank, the massive security guard, didn't waste any time. He grabbed Fallon firmly by her elbow, his grip leaving no room for argument. Let's go, miss. Move it. Romy and Jovi didn't even wait to be formally escorted. They practically sprinted for the exit on their expensive heels, terrified of being publicly associated with the massive, embarrassing mess Fallon had just created. Fallon fought back, digging her heels in, but she was literally dragged backward across the marble floor by the guard. She glared at me over her shoulder, her eyes wild and manic with rage and humiliation. This is not over, Sutton. She screamed hysterically as Frank shoved her out and the heavy, soundproof glass door shut firmly behind her, instantly cutting off her shrieking voice. The quiet elegance of the boutique rushed back into the room. I let out a long, shaky breath that I didn't realize I had been holding in. My adrenaline was crashing, and my legs suddenly felt incredibly weak and unsteady beneath me. Mr. Walsh slowly turned to look at me, his intense, terrifying expression softening instantly into one of genuine concern. Are you all right? He asked gently, stepping closer. He looked at my face closely, his eyes scanning my features, and for a fraction of a second, a look of profound confusion flashed across his gray eyes. He blinked rapidly, stepping back just slightly, realizing his error. I am fine, I said, my voice shaky but determined. But I am really not your wife. A faint, slightly embarrassed flush crept up his strong neck, though he very quickly recovered his smooth composure. I sincerely apologize, he said, offering a small, polite smile. From the back, your hair color, your exact height, even the specific shade and cut of your blue dress, you look remarkably like my actual wife, Claire. She is supposed to be meeting me here in 10 minutes to look at anniversary gifts. When I saw that woman raise her hand to you, my instincts just took over. I am Sutton, I said, dropping my hand from my cheek. Thank you for stepping in. You really did not have to do that for a stranger. The mistake was entirely mine, but my intervention was very intentional, he replied, his tone serious again. No one deserves to be treated like that, treated like garbage. Especially by their own family. He had clearly heard Fallon use the word sister before the slap. Mr. Calloway rushed back over, handing me a glass of iced water with shaking hands. I am so deeply sorry for that terrible disturbance, madam. We will process your beautiful earrings immediately, and please accept a discount for the emotional distress you endured on our premises. As Tara carefully packed the brilliant diamonds into the elegant blue box, I handed over my metal black card once again. The transaction went through instantly, silently confirming my success. Mr. Walsh stood nearby, watching me with a highly curious, calculating expression. As I leaned over the counter to sign the printed receipt, he noticed the heavy, engraved metal business card that I had accidentally pulled out of my leather wallet along with my credit card. It had fallen face up onto the glass counter. He politely reached out and picked it up to hand it back to me. His sharp eyes casually scanned the embossed silver letters. Sutton, Supply Chain Director, Apex Logistics. His thick eyebrows raised high on his forehead. He looked from the small metal card in his hand up to my face, a slow, incredibly intriguing, and slightly dangerous smile forming on his lips. Apex Logistics? He asked, his voice suddenly taking on a very different, very businesslike tone. Yes, I replied, taking the card from him and sliding it back into my wallet, feeling a bit confused. Why do you ask? He chuckled, a rich, warm, and highly confident sound that filled the space between us. Because, Sutton, my name is Stellan Walsh. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Omnicorp. My heart skipped a massive beat in my chest. I knew that name. Everyone in the corporate world knew that name. Omnicorp was the massive, multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate that had just aggressively acquired Apex Logistics in a hostile buyout last month. Stellan Walsh wasn't just some random billionaire tech mogul who happened to save me. He was, technically and quite literally, the boss of my boss. He owned the very company I worked for. Well, Stellan said, gesturing smoothly toward the door of the boutique as Tara handed me my shopping bag. Considering I just falsely claimed you as my wife to successfully intimidate your abusive sister, and considering I now realize you are one of my newly acquired top executives, I think the absolute least I can do is buy you a cup of coffee. We have some very interesting things to discuss. We left the quiet sanctuary of the jewelry boutique and walked 2 blocks down the sunlit, bustling street to a quiet, incredibly upscale, and discreet cafe. The impeccably dressed barista clearly knew Stellan by name and, without a single word being exchanged, quickly ushered us past the crowded main floor to a highly private, leather-ulaged corner booth near the back, safely away from the large glass windows and the prying eyes of the public. Stellan casually ordered a double black espresso, and I asked for a soothing hot green tea, pressing the cool, ceramic cup against my still throbbing cheek the moment the waiter set it down on the table. So, Stellan began, leaning his large frame back against the leather seat and observing me carefully with those piercing gray eyes. Your sister. That was quite a theatrical display of unhinged aggression back there. Does she always treat you like an active enemy combatant on a battlefield? I sighed heavily, feeling strangely, inexplicably comfortable opening up to this man, despite the surreal, bizarre nature of our meeting. Fallon firmly believes that everything in life is a zero-sum competition, I explained, stirring my tea slowly. And today, I committed the unforgivable, mortal sin of buying my own expensive jewelry with my own money. It completely shattered her comfortable, long-held illusion that I am the pathetic family failure who will always remain beneath her. She panicked, and her panic turned to violence. Families can be viciously cruel, Stellan said softly, his voice losing some of its corporate edge. He stared down at his small espresso cup in silence for a long moment, tracing the rim with his thumb. People always assume that because I have a lot of money now, I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. The truth is, I grew up in a household very much like yours seems to be. I had an older brother who was the anointed king of the house. He could do no wrong. I was the silent workhorse. They loved the money and the status I could provide for them, but they deeply, bitterly despised the fact that I was the one providing it instead of him. I looked at him, genuinely surprised by his raw candor. It is rare for people of his status to admit to having messy, painful family backgrounds. How did you handle it? I asked softly. I cut them off, he said plainly, looking me straight in the eye without a hint of regret. When I finally sold my first tech startup for a massive sum, my parents and my brother immediately demanded a 50% cut of the profits simply because my parents had allowed me to sleep on a cot in their damp basement for 6 months while I coded the software. When I firmly said no, they launched a vicious, coordinated smear campaign among all of our extended relatives, calling me greedy and heartless. I realized right then that keeping toxic people around out of some misguided sense of biological obligation is exactly like drinking poison every day and expecting the other person to die. His words struck a deep, resonating chord inside me. It was exactly, precisely how I felt, articulated perfectly. You handled yourself exceptionally well back there in the store, Stellan noted, shifting the conversation back to me, a look of professional appraisal in his eyes. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of public humiliation, or they would have started screaming back, escalating the situation. You stayed freezing cold. You stayed entirely logical. You didn't give her the emotional reaction she was so desperate to get. That level of extreme emotional regulation under intense pressure is exactly why the board promoted you to director. You already know about my promotion? I asked, my eyebrows shooting up in genuine surprise. It only became official on paper on Friday afternoon. I personally sign off on all upper-level executive promotions at Apex Logistics. He smiled, a very sharp, corporate smile. I read your entire personnel file, Sutton. I read your performance reviews. You increased regional shipping efficiency by 22% in a single fiscal quarter while operating with a severely reduced budget. You are brilliant. But it seems your family doesn't appreciate, or even comprehend, your brilliance. They do not care about shipping efficiency or corporate metrics. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. My sister got engaged last night to a commercial freight broker. To my parents, he is a titan of industry simply because he drives a leased sports car, wears a flashy Rolex, and buys her shiny things. My career is just a boring desk job to them. Stellan's eyes sharpened instantly, the casual friendliness vanishing, replaced by the calculating gaze of a billionaire CEO. A commercial freight broker? What is his name? He asked, his tone suddenly very intense. Hayes, I said, slightly confused by his sudden shift in demeanor. Hayes Sterling. He runs a boutique firm called Sterling Brokerage. Stellan paused, slowly tapping his index finger on the polished wooden table. The atmosphere in the private booth shifted dramatically from friendly, empathetic banter to sharp, high-stakes business focus. Sterling Brokerage, he repeated quietly, tasting the words. Do you know him? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Stellan leaned forward too, lowering his voice so that only I could hear him. Sutton, as the brand new supply chain director of Apex, you're about to inherit a massive stack of emergency financial bailout contracts on your desk on Monday morning. Do you know exactly what those specific contracts entail? I nodded, slipping into my own professional mode. Yes. They are high-risk contracts designed to throw a temporary financial lifeline to struggling, underwater brokerages that owe us massive, outstanding debts. We offer them exclusive, highly lucrative freight lines to keep their operations afloat so they can eventually pay us back, but we only grant them if they pass a rigorous, highly intrusive financial audit and behavioral review. Exactly, Stellan said, his eyes locking onto mine with a fierce intensity. Late last week, a mid-sized brokerage firm submitted a desperate, begging plea for a $45 million emergency bailout contract. Their profit margins are bleeding out. They have severely mismanaged their assets and are mere weeks away from declaring total Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The name on the top of that distressed firm's file is Sterling Brokerage. Your future brother-in-law, Hayes Sterling, is financially drowning, Sutton. I sat back hard against the leather booth, all the breath completely knocked out of my lungs. Hayes? Bankrupt? But last night, at the celebratory dinner, he bought Fallon a massive, custom-cut diamond ring. He was loudly bragging to my father about his incredible success and his upcoming real estate purchases. He is faking it, Stellan said coldly, his voice devoid of any sympathy. He is burning through high-interest credit lines to desperately keep up appearances and secure a wealthy-looking lifestyle. And the only thing standing between him and total, catastrophic financial ruin is the final signature of the Apex supply chain director. Which, as of yesterday afternoon, is you. My mind raced a million miles a minute, connecting the dots. Fallon was marrying a massive, desperate fraud. And the arrogant man who sat at my parents' dining room table, looking down his nose at me while my mother literally kicked me out of the house into the cold night, was secretly, pathetically begging my own company for his very survival. Stellan watched the profound realization wash over my face. He picked up his cup and took a slow, deliberate sip of his dark espresso. If Sterling fails the audit, or if the director, you deems his current business practices too unethical or risky, the bailout contract is immediately denied. He loses everything. The cars, the business, the fake lifestyle. All of it goes up in smoke. I looked down at the blue velvet Callaway's box sitting on the table, containing my new, beautiful earrings. My cheek still stung sharply from Fallon's heavy hand. For 27 long years, I had always taken the high road. I had swallowed the endless insults, the financial theft, the cruel neglect, and the physical abuse. I had desperately tried to earn their love and respect by being the bigger, more mature person. But being the bigger person had only gotten me a slap in the face in front of a room full of strangers. I slowly looked up at Stellan. The billionaire sitting across from me wasn't just a random stranger who had saved me from a public scene. He was the man calmly handing me the loaded weapon I needed for my own absolute justice. When do I get to review his financial file? I asked, my voice completely steady, devoid of any hesitation, fear, or mercy. First thing Monday morning, Stellan smiled, a glint of genuine, dark admiration shining in his gray eyes. He reached across the table and lightly tapped the velvet jewelry box with his finger. Wear the new earrings to work on Monday, Sutton. I think it is going to be a very, very productive week for you. We looked at each other in the quiet booth, a silent, powerful understanding passing between us. The trap was officially set. If you are enjoying this story and want to see exactly how Sutton strategically destroys her sister's fake empire and gets her ultimate revenge, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from. Every single comment helps push this video to more people who need to hear it. Thank you so much. By the time I drove back to my apartment after my coffee with Stellan, my phone was practically vibrating off the passenger seat. The screen was a chaotic waterfall of notifications. Fallon had clearly wasted no time spinning her web of lies, and her loyal flying monkeys were already on the attack. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and finally unlocked my screen. There were 42 text messages and 11 missed calls. The messages from Romy and Jovi were exactly what you would expect from grown women who still acted like high school bullies. They accused me of being a jealous psychopath. They said I intentionally tried to ruin Fallon's engagement joy by stalking her at the jewelry store and throwing a violent tantrum. Fallon had obviously told them, and everyone else, that I was the one who physically attacked her. But the messages from my parents were the ones that truly showcased the depth of their toxic favoritism. My mother, Delphine, sent a massive block of text. She told me I was a disgrace to the family name. She said she was utterly appalled that I would publicly humiliate my sister in front of her friends just because I was bitter about being single. Then came the ultimate threat. She wrote that if I did not come to the house this coming Saturday to formally apologize on my knees to Fallon, she was going to find the number for the warehouse manager at my logistics company and report me for unstable, violent behavior. She wanted to get me fired. She genuinely thought I was still working on a loading dock, and she was willing to destroy my livelihood just to protect Fallon's fragile ego. I did not reply. I simply took a screenshot of every single message and saved them to a secure folder on my cloud drive. I was done explaining myself. I was done begging for their understanding. Just as I was about to put my phone on silent, it rang again. The caller ID showed a name I had not seen in years. Aunt Kestrel. Kestrel was my father's younger sister. She was a sharp, fiercely independent woman who had essentially been excommunicated from the family a decade ago because she refused to lend my father money for one of Fallon's failed business ventures. She was the only person in our extended family who saw right through the golden child dynamic. I answered on the third ring. Hello? Sutton, Kestrel's raspy, no-nonsense voice came through the speaker. I just received a frantic, hysterical phone call from your mother claiming you lost your mind and assaulted Fallon in a boutique. Knowing Fallon, I assume she actually hit you and is trying to control the narrative. Are you okay? I let out a long, heavy sigh, feeling a strange wave of relief that someone actually believed me. She slapped me across the face and Kestrel. Because I bought myself a pair of earrings and she could not handle it. There was a tense silence on the line. Then Kestrel spoke, her tone dropping into something incredibly serious. Sutton, meet me at the diner on 4th Street in 20 minutes. There is something you urgently need to see. Something I have been keeping quiet about for years because I thought they would eventually fix it. But if they are willing to destroy your reputation over a pair of earrings, all bets are off. 20 minutes later, I slid into a vinyl booth across from my aunt. She looked exactly the same, sharp eyes and a stern jawline. Without even saying hello, she slid a thick, manila envelope across the sticky table toward me. Open it, she ordered quietly. I opened the clasp and pulled out a stack of dense financial documents. They were bank statements, loan agreements, and credit reports. I scanned the first page and my blood ran ice cold. At the top of a federal loan document for a luxury vehicle was my name, Sutton Marie. Below it was my social security number. I do not understand, I whispered, my eyes darting across the pages. I drive a 6-year-old sedan. I have never taken out a loan for a Porsche. Look at the date, Kestrel said, tapping a red fingernail on the paper. For years ago. When you were 23 and living in that tiny studio apartment, barely eating so you could pay off your student loans. Your parents used your social security number and your clean credit history to secretly co-sign a massive auto loan. My mind was reeling. A loan for what? For Fallon's Porsche, Kestrel stated bluntly. And it is not just the car. Flip to the next page. They opened 2 high-limit credit cards in your name to pay off Fallon's massive shopping debts when she maxed out her own cards. They have been making the absolute minimum payments just to keep it out of default, but the total balance is staggering. I looked at the bold red numbers at the bottom of the summary page. $120,000. My own parents had committed federal identity theft and strapped me with $120,000 of hidden debt, all to maintain the illusion that Fallon was a wealthy, successful socialite. They had literally stolen my financial future to buy her designer clothes and a sports car. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the booth. The betrayal was so profound, so entirely wicked, that it bypassed sadness and went straight into a cold, clinical rage. The invisible blade they had used to cut me my entire life was not just emotional. It was a calculated, criminal conspiracy. I slowly put the papers back into the envelope. I did not cry. My cheeks still throbbed from the slap, but the pain felt distant now. Why are you giving this to me now? I asked Kestrel, my voice devoid of any emotion. Because they called me today asking for a massive cash loan to help pay for Fallon's upcoming wedding to that broker, Kestrel scoffed. They are tapped out, Sutton. They are running on fumes and stolen credit. It is time to end this ridiculous play they have been putting on. I nodded slowly, looking at the manila envelope. The fear of their rejection was entirely gone, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. I am supposed to go to their house this Saturday for a family meeting, I said softly, a dark plan forming in my mind. They want me to get on my knees and apologize to Fallon. Kestrel raised an eyebrow, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. And what are you going to do? I looked out the diner window at the darkening sky. I am going to give them exactly what they deserve. By the time Saturday evening arrived, I was a completely different person. The girl who used to shrink in the corners of her parents' house was dead and buried. I spent 2 hours getting ready. I put on a razor-sharp, tailored black suit that screamed corporate power. I styled my hair sleek and straight and applied a bold, dark red lipstick. And right before I walked out the door, I opened the blue velvet Callaway's box and put on the $18,500 diamond earrings. They caught the light, sparkling like tiny stars against my jawline. They were my armor. I pulled up to my parents' suburban house exactly on time. I did not park in the driveway. I parked on the street, ensuring my exit would not be blocked. I walked up the pathway, the manila envelope from Aunt Kestrel safely tucked into my leather briefcase, right alongside the explosive financial file Stellan had handed to me on Monday morning. I pushed the front door open without knocking. The atmosphere inside the house was thick, oppressive, and heavy with anticipation. It felt exactly like walking into a courtroom where the jury had already been paid off. They were all gathered in the formal living room. My father, Evander, stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed tightly. My mother, Delphine, sat on the edge of the sofa, looking deeply aggrieved. Next to her sat Fallon, dabbing her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the traumatized victim to absolute perfection. Sitting protectively beside Fallon was her fiancé, Hayes, wearing a smug, self-righteous expression. Even Romy and Jovi were there, sitting on the love seat like loyal gargoyles, brought in to serve as witnesses to my anticipated humiliation. Well, my father barked as I walked into the room. Look who finally decided to show up and face the consequences of her actions. I did not flinch. I walked calmly to the center of the room, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. I remained standing, refusing the silent invitation to sit down and submit. "Good evening, Evander," I said smoothly. His eyes widened slightly at the use of his first name. My mother gasped softly. "Do not use that tone with your father," Delphine scolded, standing up and retrieving a piece of paper from the coffee table. "You are here tonight because your behavior has become entirely unacceptable. You violently attacked your sister in public unprovoked. You jeopardized her mental health right before her wedding." Fallon sniffled loudly, leaning her head on Hayes' shoulder. "It was so awful, Hayes," she whispered, making sure everyone could hear her. She just snapped. "I am terrified of her." Hayes glared at me, puffing out his chest. "You should be deeply ashamed of yourself, Sutton. If I had been there, I would have had you arrested on the spot. You cannot just go around assaulting people because you are jealous of their success." I looked at Hayes, feeling a small, dark thrill of anticipation. "Oh, Hayes, you really have no idea what is going on here, do you?" My mother marched forward and aggressively shoved the piece of paper toward my chest. "Take this," she demanded. "We had a lawyer draft this up this morning. Since you clearly have zero self-control, we are setting firm boundaries." I took the paper and scanned it. It was a joke. It was a printed list of demands. Number 1. I was to immediately transfer 20% of my monthly salary to Fallon's account to compensate for her emotional distress. Number 2. I was officially banned from attending her wedding. Number 3. I was to issue a written apology to her friends. I read the ridiculous document, and a genuine, cold laugh escaped my lips. It was so profoundly absurd that it was almost funny. "You think this is funny?" Fallon screeched, dropping the crying act instantly, her true venom surfacing. "You're a monster, Sutton. You think you are so rich now just because you bought those fake, cloudy pieces of glass in your ears? You probably bought those at a pawn shop." I casually tossed their printed list of demands onto the floor, stepping right over it. "My earrings are flawless, Fallon. I bought them to celebrate my promotion to supply chain director. A real job. With real money." Delphine crossed her arms, her face turning red with anger. "We do not care about your little warehouse job, Sutton. We care about how you treat this family. You owe your sister money for what you did." I looked around the room at the people who had tortured me for 27 years. The family drama was reaching its peak. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to cry and beg for their forgiveness. Instead, I calmly unlatched my leather briefcase. If you are ready for the ultimate revenge, make sure you like this video and hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss how Sutton destroys this entire room. I smiled, a chilling, empty smile that made my father take a step back. "I do not owe Fallon a single dime," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "In fact, Delphine, I believe this family owes me precisely $120,000. The number hung in the air like a live grenade. $120,000. My mother's face instantly drained of all color, turning a sickly, ashen white. My father's arms dropped from his chest, his jaw going slack. Fallon looked confused, her shallow mind unable to grasp the significance of the number. "What are you talking about?" Fallon demanded, looking from me to our parents. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the thick manila envelope Aunt Kestrel had given me. I pulled out the federal loan documents and threw them onto the coffee table. They scattered across the glass surface. "I am talking about identity theft, federal wire fraud, and grand larceny," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a newly sharpened knife. "I am talking about the massive luxury auto loan and the 2 high-yield credit cards you secretly opened in my name, using my social security number to fund Fallon's fake, pathetic lifestyle." Evander stammered, his eyes darting frantically toward the door as if he wanted to run. "Sutton, sweetheart, let us just calm down. We were going to tell you. It was just a temporary measure. A temporary measure that has been secretly ruining my debt-to-income ratio for 4 years?" I interrupted loudly, stepping forward. "You stole my identity to buy her a Porsche because she is too lazy to get a job. That is a federal crime. That is prison time, Evander." Romy and Jovi shifted uncomfortably on the love seat, suddenly realizing they were witnessing a major felony unfold. They looked at Fallon with wide, judgmental eyes. Fallon panicked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You're lying. You're just trying to ruin my life again." "Hayes, do not listen to her." I slowly turned my gaze away from my terrified parents and locked eyes with Hayes. The smug, self-righteous expression had completely vanished from his face. He was looking at the loan documents on the table with a sickening realization. "Oh, Hayes," I said softly, my voice dripping with dangerous pity. "You should really pay close attention to this next part. Because you think you are marrying into a wealthy, established family. But the truth is, this family is entirely broke. They are running on stolen credit and lies. And you, Hayes, you are not doing much better, are you?" Hayes stiffened, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? I run a highly successful brokerage firm." I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out the second file. The heavy, confidential corporate file that Stellan Walsh had handed to me on Monday morning. I held it up so he could see the Apex Logistics logo stamped on the front. "Really?" I challenged him, my eyes locking onto his. "Because according to the desperate, begging emergency bailout application you submitted to my corporation last week, Sterling Brokerage is drowning in debt and is exactly 14 days away from total Chapter 11 bankruptcy." Hayes physically stumbled backward, bumping into the side table. A framed picture of Fallon crashed to the floor, shattering the glass. His mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. How do you have that file?" he gasped. "Because I am the new supply chain director of Apex Logistics," I stated clearly, letting the heavy reality of my title crush his ego. "I am the sole executive who reviews and signs off on emergency bailout contracts for failing, pathetic little brokerages like yours." Fallon looked at Hayes, her eyes wide with sheer terror. "Hayes?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is she talking about? You said business was booming. You bought me this ring." "He bought that ring using fraudulent, high-interest credit to keep up his fake appearances," I told her, not breaking eye contact with Hayes. "You two are truly perfect for each other. Two broke, desperate frauds pretending to be rich." Hayes took a step toward me, his hands balled into tight fists, his face a mask of desperate rage. "You listen to me, you little witch," he hissed. "You are going to approve that contract, or I swear to God." "Or what?" I interrupted, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "You will hurt me? I wouldn't do that if I were you." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small remote control, and pointed it at the massive smart TV mounted above the fireplace. Earlier that afternoon, I had easily hacked into my parents' home network and paired my phone to their screen. "You all claimed I attacked Fallon unprovoked," I said loudly, addressing the entire room. "You told her friends I was violent. Let us see what the security cameras at Callaway's caught." I pressed play. The massive television screen flashed to life in ultra-high definition. The video was crystal clear, provided directly by Mr. Callaway after Stellan's legal team requested it. The room watched in absolute, horrified silence as the footage played. It showed Fallon aggressively leaning over the counter. It showed her violently yanking her bag, shattering the expensive glass display case. And then, in slow, undeniable motion, it showed Fallon winding up and slapping me brutally across the face. The video ended. The silence in the living room was so profound you could hear a pin drop. Romy and Jovi stood up immediately, grabbing their purses. They didn't say a single word to Fallon. They just hurried out the front door, eager to escape the radioactive fallout of her lies. Fallon's fake crying stopped instantly. She stood there exposed, humiliated, and stripped of all her power. But the final, fatal blow was not going to come from me. Right on cue, the heavy brass knocker on the front door banged loudly, echoing through the silent, shattered house. The loud, rhythmic knocking on the front door shattered whatever fragile, terrified silence remained in the living room. My father, moving like a man walking to his own execution, slowly shuffled toward the entryway and pulled the door open. Standing on the front porch, illuminated by the harsh glare of the porch light, was Stellan Walsh. He was dressed in a dark, imposing bespoke suit, his presence radiating an overwhelming aura of power and wealth. Standing right next to him was a severe-looking man holding a leather litigation briefcase. A lawyer. Stellan did not wait to be invited inside. He stepped over the threshold, his tall frame dominating the space, forcing my father to stumble backward into the hallway. The lawyer followed closely behind. Stellan's stormy gray eyes swept across the room, taking in the shattered picture frame on the floor, my mother's pale, terrified face, and Fallon's trembling posture. Finally, his eyes landed on me, and he gave a very small, approving nod. "Good evening," Stellan said, his deep voice filling the room. "My name is Stellan Walsh, CEO of Omnicorp. And this is my lead corporate attorney, Mr. Davis." My father swallowed hard, clearly recognizing the name of the billionaire tech mogul. What is the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice cracking pitifully. "Why are you in my house?" Stellan ignored him completely. He turned his chilling gaze directly onto Fallon. Fallon shrank back, trying to hide behind Hayes, but Hayes aggressively stepped away from her, wanting nothing to do with the crosshairs of a billionaire. "Miss Fallon," Mr. Davis, the lawyer, spoke up, his tone clinical and sharp. "We represent Callaway's Fine Jewelry. We are here to officially serve you with a civil lawsuit for the intentional destruction of private property, totaling $42,000 in damages for the antique glass display case you shattered. Furthermore, we are formally filing criminal charges for assault and battery against our client, Sutton." Fallon's knees actually buckled. She let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper and collapsed onto the floor, her designer dress pooling around her. She looked up at Stellan, her mascara running down her face. "Please," she begged, her voice a desperate croak. "I don't have $42,000. I don't have anything." Stellan looked down at her with zero pity. "You should have thought about that before you raised your hand to strike a woman who is infinitely better than you will ever be." Stellan then smoothly turned his attention to Hayes. Hayes was sweating profusely, his expensive shirt clinging to his back. "And Mr. Sterling," Stellan said, his voice turning dangerously quiet. "I am fully aware of your pending bailout application with my subsidiary, Apex Logistics." Hayes clasped his hands together in a pathetic begging gesture. "Mr. Walsh, please. My firm is everything I have. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know Sutton was the director. You didn't know she held the keys to your survival, so you treated her like dirt." Stellan corrected him coldly. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character and your business ethics. I do not do business with frauds, and I certainly do not do business with men who enable abusers. Your $45 million bailout contract is officially denied. Furthermore, I have instructed my board to permanently blacklist Sterling Brokerage from operating on any Omnicorp-controlled ports. You are finished in this industry." The color drained entirely from Hayes' face. He stood there for a few seconds, processing the sheer magnitude of his ruin. His business was dead. His reputation was destroyed. He slowly turned to look at Fallon, who was still sobbing wildly on the floor. The illusion of their perfect, wealthy romance shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Hayes realized that marrying Fallon wouldn't bring him wealth, it would only bring him a family buried in criminal debt and lawsuits. With a look of utter disgust, Hayes forcefully yanked the gaudy diamond ring off Fallon's finger. She screamed, trying to grab his hand, but he pushed her away. "We are done," Hayes spat, throwing the heavy ring onto the glass coffee table where it clattered loudly against the scattered loan documents. "You are a psychotic, broke liar, Fallon. Have fun in court." Without looking back, Hayes stormed out of the house, slamming the heavy front door behind him so hard the walls shook. The total collapse of the family empire was complete. Within the span of 20 minutes, the golden child had lost her rich fiancé, acquired a massive lawsuit, and faced criminal assault charges. The parents were exposed as federal felons. Their entire reality was lying in ruins on the living room floor. My mother, Delphine, finally broke. She fell to her knees right in front of me, tears streaming down her face, her hands reaching out to grab the hem of my pants. She was terrified. Not just of the shame, but of the very real threat of federal prison for the identity theft. "Sutton, please," Delphine wailed, her voice echoing with sheer, naked desperation. Please, my baby girl. We are so sorry. We were desperate. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please do not call the police about the loans. We will do anything. We will fix it. Please do not send your father and me to jail. I looked down at the woman who had thrown my college acceptance letter into the trash. I looked at the father who had told me to take a cab home after surgery. I looked at the sister who had physically assaulted me out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. I slowly stepped back, pulling my pant leg out of my mother's desperate grasp. The power dynamic in the room had shifted permanently and entirely. I was no longer the invisible, quiet scapegoat waiting patiently in the shadows for a crumb of affection. I was the one holding the executioner's axe, and they all knew it. I did not scream. I did not yell or throw a tantrum. I looked down at my weeping mother and my trembling father with eyes as cold and unforgiving as the bottom of the ocean. Get up, Delphine, I said, my voice quiet, steady, and devoid of any warmth. Stop embarrassing yourself. She scrambled awkwardly to her feet, leaning heavily against my father, who looked as though he had aged 20 years in the last half hour. Fallon was still curled up on the rug, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, entirely abandoned by her fiancé and her friends. I am going to give you my final terms, I announced, addressing my parents directly. You have precisely 30 days to refinance that fraudulent luxury auto loan and those credit cards into your own names. You will remove my social security number from every single financial institution you have illegally infected. You will pay off the balance in full, or you will take the debt yourselves. If my credit report is not completely clean in exactly 30 days, I will walk straight into the FBI field office with this manila envelope, and I will personally testify against both of you in federal court. Do you understand me? Evander nodded frantically, tears welling in his eyes. Yes. Yes, Sutton. We will sell the house. We will liquidate my retirement accounts. We will do it. I then turned my attention to the pathetic heap on the floor. And as for you, Fallon, you will deal with Mr. Walsh's lawyers regarding your assault charges and the destruction of property. You are on your own. I picked up my briefcase, turned my back on the wreckage of my toxic family, and looked at Stellan. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Walsh. I believe our business here is concluded. Stellan offered a brief, respectful nod, stepping aside to let me pass. After you, Director. I walked out the front door and stepped into the cool, crisp night air. I did not look back. I did not shed a single tear. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from that house for the very last time in my life. 1 month later, the sun was shining brightly through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner executive office on the 40th floor of the Apex Logistics building. I sat in my ergonomic leather chair, sipping a perfect cup of green tea, reviewing a highly lucrative maritime shipping contract. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was an automated alert from a major credit bureau. My credit report was now completely spotless. Evander and Delphine had clearly sold their suburban house and drained their savings to pay off the $120,000 they had stolen in my name to avoid federal prison. I had not spoken to them since that night. I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, and instructed the security desk at my building to never allow them past the lobby. Fallon had pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and destruction of property to avoid jail time. She was currently working a minimum-wage retail job to pay off the massive civil judgment she owed to Callaway's fine jewelry. Without her parents' money to fund her lifestyle, and without a wealthy fiancé to rescue her, she was finally forced to face the harsh reality of the real world. There was a light knock on my open office door. Stellan Walsh leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 cups of artisanal coffee. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, his gray eyes shining with an unmistakable warmth. "Morning, Sutton," he said, walking in and handing me a cup. "I just reviewed your quarterly efficiency metrics. You are up another 15%. The board is thrilled." I smiled, taking the coffee. "Thank you, Stellan. It helps when you can finally focus your energy on your future instead of constantly fighting ghosts from your past." He glanced at the sparkling diamonds catching the sunlight on my ears. "Those earrings look incredibly good on you," he noted smoothly. "They're a reminder," I said softly, reaching up to touch the cool stone. It had taken a long time for me to learn the ultimate philosophy of survival. You cannot grow into the person you are meant to be if you constantly force yourself to fit into a tight, suffocating shirt that someone else maliciously tailored for you. My family wanted me to be small so they could feel big. They wanted me to fail so they could feel successful. But the moment I stopped begging for their validation, the moment I established ironclad boundaries and stood firm in my own undeniable reality, their entire fake empire crumbled into dust. Sometimes, walking away from the people who share your blood is not a tragedy. Sometimes, cutting off a toxic family is the single most beautiful, liberating act of self-love you can ever perform. I did not lose a family, I gained my entire life. But I know that some people still judge me for being so ruthless. I have heard whispers from extended relatives who think I was too cold, too calculating. They say I should have shown mercy to my parents, that I should have forgiven my sister because family is family. So, I have to ask you, the people listening to my story. I cut them off entirely and refused to accept their desperate apologies. Was I wrong? Did I go too far in destroying their lives to protect my own? Or was I entirely justified in handing them exactly the karma they had spent decades building? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you have ever had to deal with a toxic golden child or narcissistic parents, please share your own experiences in the comments so we can support each other. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a wild story. See you in the next video.